for me right now, I don't know if being a carrier affects me in my daily life as much. But in thinking about my future, thinking about like explaining to, my potential fiance about, having kids with a bleeding disorder, making sure I have a job with good health insurance, making sure that I have, like a doctor that's aware of my condition as well as potentially my baby's condition when I give birth. Being able to like raise potentially children with a bleeding disorder, keeping them safe and taking care of them and learning, all the things that my parents had to go through and stuff, and learning how to like poke needles into little kids' arms and stuff like that. Like it's crazy stuff that like I feel like isn't necessarily something normal that people think about. But like for me, I'm like, the more prepared I am now, like I'm planning on having kids at some point. It's just stuff that I have to think about. So, I mean, it's a lot easier now. And I think a lot of people don't feel as bad for us now as they used to. I mean, it was a lot worse, like before we had this factor medicine. And so like the main thing now is that, just people don't realize it can be as bad as it is. Like I still have a risk of like, if I hurt myself, that it could, be a traumatic bleeding experience and could be really bad. I got a concussion last year, and for me it was scary because I was like, okay, I mean, I watched like some video in health class or whatever about like how a concussion works and stuff, and there's like bleeding in the brain, and if there's too much bleeding, it starts putting pressure on your brain and it can cause brain damage, it can kill you. And so I was like, like really like concerned and, frustrated because I was like, this could be made worse because of, my disorder. And so I was like, if I go to sleep right now, am I going to die in my sleep? And I just, was kind of worried about it. And it's just kind of scary because nobody can tell you whether or not you're safe for sure. And nobody knows for sure, like where, like how bad it is. And for me, it was a matter of like, I asked for a priesthood blessing, and, and then I went and saw the doctor in the morning, and I knew I wasn't going to die in my sleep, which maybe was a little bit of, I was overreacting, but it's just, kind of an uncertain area. And, it's just kind of hard. I know my brother, when he played basketball in high school, he would get a recurring bleed in his toe joint. And, and sometimes with hemophiliacs, they do have like a target joint where it bled there once and it keeps, bleeding every once in a while. It'll get bad again. And so he would have to, use crutches sometimes at school, and he would have to take practice off because he was, his toe hurt and he couldn't, like, if he exercised on it, it would get worse. And which was frustrating for him because he wants to be the best basketball player he can be. And also people would sometimes accuse him of being like faking it just to get out of, doing hard work or getting attention or whatever. And it's not what it is. It's just the disease. So that's kind of hard. Like, and it's such a rare disease that people like really don't have really any idea of what it is or what could be, what's going on. So, I mean, it's good to keep talking about it, I guess. But it sometimes is a little bit of a lonely road. So. The veins themselves are as strong and healthy as anyone's veins. The problem is that where you might stub your toe and be like, oh, ow, that hurt, and like you forget it later, in someone who has hemophilia, it could become a bigger and bigger problem, and maybe you didn't notice it at first, but later you're like, oh, dang, like that's a toe bleed. I guess I should probably infuse now. And so I think that's probably more of what it is that you let it get worse once, then maybe you should have, and then after that it becomes a recurring problem because of the damage that's already been done. So the veins themselves are just normal, but yeah, one injury can, I guess, get blown into like a way bigger problem if you don't take care of it. Okay, so what happens is if you injure a joint, usually you'll have like fluids go to like cushion it and everything, or it'll get like inflamed and stuff, and there can also be internal bleeding where blood is flowing into the joint. So you have this space where the joint like moves and stuff, right? But it's getting full of blood and things. And so the problem with hemophiliacs is that the blood doesn't stop. So it'll just keep growing and growing and swelling the joint. And that can cause a lot of internal damage to the joint and make it more likely to happen again. And so it's not as big a deal nowadays as it used to be, but like a lot of times it would just get super swollen. Like if you think about your knee, if you just like 10 times the size it would normally be, that causes a lot of internal damage. So that kind of is, and so as a recurring thing, if it happens again and again, it just keeps, getting worse and worse. So